Perhaps you might have heard about racial segregation that Black people faced in housing and rights while living in the United States. A structural framework was in place, like Jim Crow laws, which segregated Black people. However, how extreme this segregation could be, how inhuman it can be after separating Black people from white towns and Black children from white schools. Well, the degree of insensitivity was grave. Hence, Black people even faced pool segregation. They were not allowed to enter the pool designated for white people. However, in 1969, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, a kids' TV show, changed everything. Mr. Rogers did something seen by millions of people, ending all pool segregation. But what's the entire story of this incident? Welcome to a new episode of Black Culture Diary, a channel where we talk about less known and hidden Black history, culture, arts, and lost civilization. We scrutinize history here to bring the Black culture back on the surface again. We encourage you to join our community in supporting and building a strong Black history education medium. In this episode, we will tell you how a powerful gesture by Mr. Rogers broke color barriers and helped end racial segregation. Let's get started. During the late 19th century to mid-20th century, racial discrimination, racism, and racial segregation were at their peak in the United States. Yes, it was a time when racial segregation laws, known as Jim Crow laws, were in effect limiting Black people from going to white areas. It's quite insensitive that public facilities in many states, especially in the South, were divided based on race. This included parks, schools, transportation, and recreational areas, including public swimming pools. In the segregated South, public swimming pools were strictly segregated between white individuals and African Americans. White-only pools were designated exclusively for white Americans, while African Americans were provided separate facilities referred to as colored or Negro pools, which were often of inferior quality. These segregated pools enforced strict racial boundaries, preventing individuals from crossing over. The conditions of the segregated pools for African Americans were typically subpar compared to those for white Americans. The colored pools were often smaller, inadequately maintained, and lacked the same amenities and resources as the white pools. They were frequently overcrowded, and access to facilities like changing rooms, showers, and recreational equipment was limited. All this has done irreversible damage to people's beliefs about racism. Even those who were against racism were slowly seeing a change in their behavior. But how? Well, by forcing Black people to go to separate pools, the U.S. government created a sense of discrimination. It was established that white people should not be in the same pool as Black people. As they believed that white are superior, unlike inferior Black people, they should be separated. The white public had already decided they should not allow Black people to come near them. But something happened which warmly showed white people how they were joining the racial bandwagon the U.S. government was driving. By 1969, segregation laws were gradually softening. However, they had brainwashed white people already. Even if segregation were deemed illegal, white people would still feel contempt for Black people. It's how human psychology works. Hence, in the late 1960s, racial segregation was still a widespread problem in public places, including swimming pools, even though the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964 to prohibit such discrimination. This act was formulated to end all kinds of discrimination based on sex, origin, religion, color, and race. However, it was proven ineffective. Also, segregation wasn't limited to the South. It also happened in northern regions, where discriminatory behavior took place. Often a fact is tried to be established that racial segregation was normal in only the South of the U.S., not in the whole. But this is against the facts. In the entire U.S., distinctive discrimination was seen even if states were doing legislation. In pools, segregation was enforced through intimidation and violence, with Black swimmers facing beatings if they tried to enter. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. During the Civil Rights Movement, pools became sites of protest, with people challenging segregation by jumping into segregated pools. An incident worth mentioning occurred in 1964 when a group of Black and white individuals jumped into a segregated pool at a motel in St. Augustine, Florida. The enraged manager responded by pouring acid into the water, although luckily no one was injured because the acid was diluted. But the gesture quite clearly showed how far people could go to support racial segregation. Fred Rogers, aware of the ongoing exclusion of black people from pools and the increasing racial tensions after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., took deliberate action. On an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood that aired on May 9, 1969, he invited Officer Clemmons, a black police officer portrayed by Francois Clemmons. Officer Clemmons had come to Mr. Rogers to check how he was doing during the hot day. Mr. Rogers then invited him to join him in cooling their feet in a children's wading pool. Initially hesitant due to the lack of a towel, Clemmons eventually accepted Rogers' offer to share his towel. The significance of their simple act was profound. Two men, one black and one white, removed their shoes and socks, rolled up their pants, and dipped their feet together in a shallow pool on a hot day. Through this action, Rogers and Clemmons showed that people of different races could peacefully share the water. When Clemmons needed to leave, he used Rogers' towel to dry his feet, just as Rogers had promised. Rogers then used the same towel after Clemmons, symbolizing their shared intimacy and exposing the unfairness of denying black individuals access to pools and other public spaces. While one episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood couldn't erase the deep-seated history of discrimination, it served as a small step toward promoting integration and acceptance. Clemmons, reflecting on the episode, expressed his hope for a changing world. He acknowledged the progress that has been made, but also recognized that complete transformation is still needed. The pool scene remained significant for both Rogers and Clemmons. In 1993, during Clemmons' final appearance on the show, they recreated the pool scene. This time, Rogers took the towel and dried Clemmons' feet himself, reminiscent of the act of Jesus washing his disciples' feet. For Clemmons, a black gay man, this act held great meaning, emphasizing love, kindness, and acceptance. Fred Rogers' own journey demonstrated how attitudes can evolve over time. Initially, he asked Clemmons to hide his sexuality for the sake of the show during the 1960s and 70s. However, Rogers eventually accepted Clemmons for who he was. The pool scene and their continued connection exemplify the powerful messages of love, kindness, and acceptance that Rogers aimed to convey to his viewers. However, that message did not stop there. It started to change how people supported Jim Crow laws and racial segregation without even realizing that. But the show's episode had made them think about what they were doing wrong. That episode really made people question themselves and how they were being a part of structural, institutional, and social segregation. Not only that, but this incident led to the Supreme Court ruling against pool segregation in the U.S., allowing black people to use the same pools that white people used. It was said that swimming pools are public property, and racial discrimination cannot be made an excuse to limit anyone from accessing public facilities. But there are some facts you should know about the Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood show in this incident. It should be noted that Mr. Rogers, whose real name was Fred Rogers, was the host of the show. He would show his kindness, letting the audience see a society without any discrimination. In that special episode, Fred Rogers instantaneously decided to do something which might send a strong message when American society was deeply sinking in discrimination. Officer Clemmons, whose real name was Francois Clemmons, was an actor who played the role of a police officer. This pair played this scene, recording an episode which would be timeless. And it really has proved timeless. Even if both Mr. Rogers and Officer Clemmons were not real characters, they succeeded in creating something which was more real than anything. Perhaps if they were real characters, nobody would have learned so much. But as they were watched by millions of viewers, including children, young and elders alike, they shaped opinions warmly. People realized how they had unknowingly accepted racial segregation and how that could be broken with simple gestures. For many, this particular episode created shockwaves against the social segregation black people faced in the United States, which really seems to be the case. What if Mr. Rogers, an actor, had not shown this gesture in the show? Will we be still seeing pool segregation in the United States? Let us know your opinion on the role of the Supreme Court of the United States of America when it ended social segregation after this incident. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.